Welcome to the Sydney Professional Development Forum, or PDF for short. I'm Sean Chi, and I'll be the moderator for this evening. I'd like to thank everyone here for participating in PDF's second digital event since the pandemic started. We all hope you're keeping well. I'd like to remind everyone here to keep connected and to support each other amid this crisis. For those who are unfamiliar with PDF was established to help diverse professionals reach their full potential in the Australian workplace. We believe that everyone, not just the elite few, should have access to the right tools, techniques, and networks to develop themselves. We believe that by becoming the best version of ourselves, we lead a more fulfilling life and aspire those around us to do the same. And we do this by running events that aim to inform, connect, and inspire. A bit of housekeeping before we get started. Please note that this is a recorded session that may be distributed via social media in the future. And also I'd like everyone to update their names and turn on their cameras so we can better connect with each other. And lastly, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. There should be an opportunity in perhaps the last 10 to 15 minutes to ask questions directly. We'll aim to wrap things up around 7 p.m. tonight. So tonight is not your typical session. I think many, if not all of us, would have experienced self-limiting beliefs at some point in our lives. Have you ever wondered why you just can't make that next step in your life? Perhaps there's a fear of failure, or maybe you convince yourself that you're just not good enough. Sometimes we dig a bit deeper, perhaps there's something in your past that's holding you back. So tonight, we're lucky to have Cathy No as our special guest. Today, Cathy is an entrepreneur, writer, speaker, presenter, diversity advocate, and CEO and founder of Keynoteworthy. However, she'll be sharing a very personal story about the incredible challenges she's faced in her past and how she broke free from her self-limiting beliefs to be the person she is today. In tonight's session, we'll explore cultural identity, the bamboo ceiling, harnessing the power of positive procrastination, and the need to create boundaries to prevent burnout. Without further ado, I'll hand over to Cathy.
Thank you. Thank you for the warm introduction, Sean. Just before I begin, I just want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which we all meet today. We're all from different parts of Australia. I would also like to pay my respects to the elders past, present and future. Hello everyone, and thank you, Sean, for the housekeeping as well. So if you can turn on your cameras, that would be great. And use the chat feature as well to say hi, ask any questions, or make any comments, really. I'm pretty open, I'm really casual in my sort of style. And so today's topic is on perfectionism, and I know no doubt most of you would have experienced this at some point in your life. Perhaps you are a chronic perfectionist yourself, a recovering one, or maybe you don't know that you have these perfectionism kind of traits. I just want to point out that it's not a mental illness, although it's a personality trait. But it can lead to a lot of depression and anxiety, which I will go onto a little bit later when I share my story. So, yeah, I'm the founder of Keynoteworthy. It's my startup business, which I started last year. I'll talk a little bit about it later. But firstly, I just want to define, actually, before I start, if you can put in the chat box right now, if you are a chronic perfectionist yourself, or you don't know. So just maybe put a few comments there if you can, just while I talk, just so that I can get a gauge of kind of what bucket. I don't want to put labels as well, because I don't like labels, but kind of like, yes. So Luke says, yes, chronic perfectionist, yes. Thank you. Okay, great. So I'm just trying to figure out, how do I move this slide? Oh, God. Oh, I just slide it. Okay, so what is perfectionism? So I actually stole this from one of those psych websites. So I reworded it slightly, but perfectionism is on the rise, and especially amongst millennials and Generation Z. I'm a millennial myself, no shame in that. It also includes like casual perfectionism, like, you know, in this age of social media, we're so obsessed with having the perfect Instagram feed, the perfect filter. You know, from social media perspective, you want to look so perfect from the outside, but in the inside, it might not be reflective of that. Pathological perfectionism is an unhealthy belief that anything less than perfect is unacceptable and an irrational desire to achieve, along with being overly critical of oneself and others. And that is my definition. Has any of you, do any of you know Mel Robbins? She's a thought leader and a speaker. And she defines, so there's a little Twitter graphic there of what she defines as perfectionism. But what I take from that is that we develop these perfectionism traits because we actually are so bloody fearful of criticism, judgment, failure. So we put these like really big goals and standards on ourselves, all this pressure. But then ultimately we lose. And then, so I'll share my story of how perfectionism made me lose. And just a bit of warning, I'm going to go through a lot of personal stuff about me. And I'm going to admit, this is a little uncomfortable for me. As a perfectionist myself, I'm so used to presenting in person. So in this virtual environment, it is, out of my comfort zone because I cannot actually read, what you're thinking, your body language, that sort of thing, those cues. And also a lot of this is personal stuff, which I don't normally talk about every day. But in this context, because I am talking about perfectionism and recovering from it, it helps to be vulnerable because that's part of the process of overcoming it. So a bit about me. I had a really strict Asian Catholic upbringing. And for 20 years straight, I went to church every single week. Not because I wanted to, but because my family expected me to. And they would tell me, if you don't go to church, you'll go to hell. That was the shame that was put on me. So that's one thing. My family came to Australia as Vietnamese refugees. And it's also Refugee Week, by the way. And just on that, they came to Australia with obviously nothing. And so they came from a place of war, of a lot of trauma. And, they were on a boat. There was a lot of uncertainty. And to come to Australia where it's safe and there's not as much disruption as they had back then. And so in their eyes and in their best interests, they want to keep themselves safe. And so for them, they wanted to do everything they could in order to keep me safe when I was born and throughout my schooling and even to today. And it took me a really, really long time to actually realize that why is my family so strict? And I used to always compare myself to my peers. I went to an all-girl private school, mostly Anglo-Saxon. And I used to be like, I felt like I never fitted in because of my heritage and the way that I was brought up, very, very strict. Couldn't go out, no boyfriends, no dating, no nothing until 25, pretty much. So yeah, I just hated for a very, very long time being Asian because of that. And it just took me so long to realize that they came from a position of fear because they wanted everything perfect. They wanted the perfect education for their daughter, perfect future, perfect everything. And then, so I might delve into that cultural kind of element a bit later on, because I'm sure for a lot of you listening today, that would be, you would relate to that as well to a certain degree, or maybe the feeling of not really fitting in. Because we are hardwired to be in a tribe. And when we are outside of that tribe, we don't feel safe. So the third bullet point is family domestic violence. And again, it took me a long time to actually openly talk about this because in the Asian culture, there's a lot of shame in that as well. You don't air your dirty laundry. What happens at home stays at home. But a lot of what happened at home it shaped me the way I was as an adult. So I would have toxic relationships. I would, of course, be a perfectionist because I was fearful of disapproval. I was fearful of my boyfriend not loving me anymore and not thinking that I was worthy. And that was because of the domestic violence, my father emotionally and physically abusing my mother and silencing her and silencing me as well because of that expectation of what a good daughter should be. A good daughter, and that's why I have Hello Kitty there, should be quiet, should be pretty, should be ladylike, should keep her legs shut. You know what I mean? And just be that really quiet, timid girl. So that's why Hello Kitty doesn't have a mouth. And yeah, I developed an eating disorder as well because I had a very negative outlook on my body. I wanted to look perfect. I thought to myself that body image was everything. And I just remember vividly one time I was in Hong Kong, and if you've been to Hong Kong, or yeah, because most of you probably listening are Asian or know someone that's Asian, like Asia is very beauty obsessed, which is probably why Korea is like the biggest beauty net worth industry. And everywhere you go, it's just like, you know, selling the latest creams to reverse aging, for you to look a certain way, skinny. You know, if you eat too much, you'll be fat. If you don't eat enough, some of you might relate to this, but you know how Asian parents are always like, you don't eat enough, eat, 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 eat. And then if you don't eat, you're rude. And then if you eat too much, you're like, you're going to get fat. Yeah, I just, okay, going back to that hotel room in Hong Kong. I don't know what came over me. This was like 10 years ago. But I was just crying. I was just like, I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy. Like I felt like a piece of shit. Like I just felt as though beauty was the number one thing. And upon reflection, it was because I was sexually harassed at work a lot and always commented on the way I looked, the way I acted. There's this, I don't know if you noticed, but fetish towards Asian women. And if you Google Asian women right now, actually don't do it right now, maybe later, you'll actually have a lot of Google hits on how to date Asian women, how to bone Asian women. There's even white men who've written Amazon books on 10 steps and tactics on how to win Asian women and that sort of thing. It's actually real. Google it later, not now because you're supposed to be listening to me. And also, yeah, competing expectation of what a perfect daughter, as I mentioned before, wife as well. It's really hard for me to say this because it's really raw, but I'm in the process of a divorce. So it's really hard. And I'm actually getting quite emotional talking about this because it's literally been in the last couple of weeks because of the expectations of me as a wife, as a mother, of what an ambitious woman should be or shouldn't be. I guess where my family were coming from is that I shouldn't be ambitious because I should be more family orientated. Sorry, because it's like so raw at the moment, but I just I wanted to share that with you. And I've done stand-up comedy, and it's only been quite recent in the last year, a year and a bit actually. I haven't been performing since the pandemic because I crave that virtual environment. Physical environment, that face-to-face environment. And it comes down to wanting that validation from people. And that's a byproduct of perfectionism. You want that validation from people. And that's not a bad thing. You know, you always want to be acknowledged for the stuff that you do, basically. And also lastly, I'm juggling different hats, which a business owner. I'm a board director, entrepreneur, speaker, writer. So then in each one of those slashes is a unique skill set as well. Being a business owner is a different hat to being a writer almost. So then I'm constantly in my brain switching, right? And with those different hats, I've developed, I want to do really well in each of those roles. And because, I'm doing so many different things, it's put a lot more pressure on me to perform better, to be better. And then so I honestly really hate it when people glorify this whole side hustle. If you're not working hard enough, then you're not worthy, that sort of attitude. It's actually quite toxic. So anyway, that's a whole different conversation. I think it's great to have a few different, it's great to have a side hustle or a side business if you can manage it mentally, and also if you have the right support network around you as well. So moving on. Who recognizes these 6 perfect women? Perfect women. It's the Kardashians, of course. I don't watch the Kardashians because it would be a mess to my mental health. But what they project on Instagram, everywhere they are, is this perfectionism. This perfect Instagram feed, how many followers you have, blah, blah, blah. And it's really toxic if you aspire to kind of lead that kind of lifestyle and feel that it might not be attainable. That's where it can be toxic. But if you're just watching it for purely entertainment, that's fine. I'm just reading the comments, sorry. Cool, thank you. All right. So what does perfectionism look and feel like? All right. So as I mentioned before, it's to avoid criticism and failure. So sometimes, when we have that, we have avoidant behavior. So then we also procrastinate. And the fear of looking stupid, silly, or foolish. So we want to keep ourselves safe, right? It's going back to that hardwired, human primal, fight it or flight. And so perfectionism is you don't fight it, you flight, you go away from it, you avoid it. And so if you avoid a certain task or make excuses, then you prevent that, that fear or whatever it is, the consequence from happening. Again, it's that validation, wanting people to constantly like you. And I remember, do you guys know Brene Brown? She's amazing. You should just watch her TED Talk when you get the chance, if you haven't. I remember seeing her last year at an event, and she said something that really, stood out to me, is that a lot of people would rather move suburbs or move schools, move jobs, just to avoid confronting someone about something. And I know I've done that. I've probably in the past maybe ghosted a few people because I did not simply, I didn't want to share that feedback. And Renee said that we're not taught how to give feedback. Our parents, my parents used to be like, oh, you didn't get an A, you're not good enough. That was it, just blunt, that was it. We're not taught to give feedback, so we need to give each other feedback. Like it's communication, and that's the only way to grow. Uh, Perfectionism also looks like you're full of guilt all the time. And I know for me, I can relate to that in the fact that I'm constantly battled with trying to be a good business owner, a good friend, balancing, being a mum and a lousy wife, that sort of thing. And I'm full of guilt, and that's what perfection is. And unless you address that, that guilt, if you don't address that guilt, then it will lead to shame. And basically the difference between guilt is that, I made a mistake, and then shame is I am the mistake. Okay, so that's the difference. So if you constantly feeling guilty, it will lead to shame, and that is really, really toxic. Who does this a lot? Piling a lot on our plates, take on so many different things, and just feeling really overwhelmed. I do that all the time, and I'm getting better at it. And it helps to ask for help, which I'll go into a little bit later. Perfection also looks like you insist on going by the rule book, black and white. Anything other than that is non-negotiable. So that's kind of like my view of what perfectionism looks like. Now, the consequences of perfectionism is that it's actually negative. There's merit in striving for, bettering your skills and doing the best that you can, because ultimately we develop this trait because we care. But sometimes if we care so much, it might be that we care about what people think more than about what we think, at the expense of our own mental health. And so then it might lead to depression, anxiety, eating disorders, deliberate self-harm. So, and I can actually relate to that, because there was a time when I had a lot of alcohol abuse and obsessive compulsive disorder. I was really obsessed with my body image. And it's stressful. Like, you become so fatigued mentally, physically, and the consequence is that you can't sleep at night, and then you can't do your job properly. So yeah, that's the consequence. I'm just going to look at the comments if someone has any questions. So it's really good engagement. Thank you. Thanks. Keep your comments coming. Being perfect actually holds you back, because we all have dreams of some sort, or maybe we haven't really discovered it, but it could be that book you've always dreamed of writing, or that podcast that you've always wanted to start, or that collaboration with a business mentor or a business partner that you've always wanted to reach out to, but then fear was holding you back because you were thinking, oh my God, what would they think? Do they think that I'm stupid? Not asking for a pay rise, a promotion, not speaking up in meetings. I can relate to that. I remember early on in my career, I did not speak up much. And it wasn't because I didn't have anything to contribute. I had a lot to contribute. But my upbringing taught me that unless you had something really valuable to say it. But if it's like only half-assed, then just shut the fuck up. Well, they didn't say fuck up. You know what I mean? So that's what was ingrained in me. It was hardwired in me to only say something if it was like, really, really, really important. But now, of course, in this Australian environment, you can't afford just to, wait for your turn, because that doesn't happen. No one's going to, tap you on the shoulder and say, F-bomb dropped. No one's going to tap you on the shoulder to say, hey, do you have something to say? What do you think about this? I mean, good leaders recognize that. Good leaders will actually scan the table and think, oh, Jae-young, you haven't, what are your thoughts on that? Or something like that. That's what a good leader is. They're inclusive, but not every leader is like that, unfortunately. And so we have to build that confidence and really overcome the fear of judgment. And I'll go into the tactics a little bit later of some of the things that I've used myself. And the fourth point is not showing up your full self and wearing a mask. And I don't know if some of you can relate to this, but I was wearing a mask for a very, very long time. And I'm quite extroverted. So people used to ask me, like, how are you so confident? Like, you're so poised and you can speak so eloquently, or blah, 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 blah. I mean, yes, it was a lot of practice, and I did do a lot of drama in school and public speaking and all that. But then on the outside, I projected this image of I had my shit together. But then deep inside, I had a lot of work to do. And that's something that I wasn't willing to show people. I wasn't willing to be vulnerable because I was taught that you don't show your weakness. You don't show any bad side of you because you don't want people to think less of you. And I've actually learned over the years that if you show your vulnerability, people will respect you more. If you admit your mistakes, people will respect you more. And I guess that's why I was comfortable in sharing with a whole bunch of strangers earlier on in this talk about my background, domestic violence, and all those really big triggering topics. And it took a lot of self-work, self-reflection, and therapy. I'm not shameful of that. I did go to a lot of therapy. Perfectionism also makes you less open to new ideas because you are so fixated on yourself and keeping yourself safe, right? Simon Sinek gave this brilliant example in his latest book of bagels. So he was running a marathon. And at the end of the finish line, there was free bagels. Now, for him, he saw, wow, great, free bagels, yum. But his mate was like, oh my God, the line is so long. And so there's two perspectives there. You see the bagels, which is the growth mindset, the opportunity. If you see the line, that's the fixed mindset. So then if you are a perfectionist, you see the line, you see the long queue, you see the barriers, you see the fear. Jeff just asked, what was that aha moment, or did it happen over a period of time? I'm still a perfectionist. But we need to understand that, this is not just an overnight thing. At the end of my talk, you're not going to be like instantly, yeah, I'm not a perfectionist anymore. It just happened gradually over time, realizing these little trigger points or my behavior, and then just understanding, getting feedback from people as well. I think it's just more of maturity. Not that I'm old or anything like that. I'm still young because I'm Asian and blessed with good genes. Thank you for that question. Being perfect holds you back, basically. That's the paradox. Oh, who knows this game? Who knows this game? I love this game. I played this game as a kid. It's called Snakes and Ladders. How to manage perfectionism. now I see life as a game of snakes and ladders. And some people use roller coaster, but roller coaster is such a cliche and overused. Sometimes you have opportunities, so the ladder, and sometimes a snake bites you on the butt. And sometimes it could be a good bite. Like sometimes it could be that kick up the pants, like to change, because maybe you weren't growing. I think the kick up my butt recently is my divorce, my pending divorce, because I was living a life where I was making someone else happy and not myself, basically. So yeah, snakes can be your friends too. So here are 8 ways to manage perfectionism. I chose 8 because 8's a lucky number and I'm born on the 8th of May. Acknowledge it. Like there's no shame in admitting it. I know it's quite a common interview question, an interview answer. It's been overdone, but because I have a background in HR, they always ask, "Oh, what's your weakness?" And people always say, "Perfectionism." Acknowledge it. That's fine. Who are you trying to prove to? And is it worth it? Is it worth it? Who are you trying to prove to? Are you trying to prove to your parents? Are you trying to prove to your spouse, your boss? And is all that emotional energy worth it? Ask yourself, what is the worst case scenario? And sometimes upon reflection, it's not that bad. It's actually not that bad. Perfect doesn't exist. We all know that, right? Perfect does not exist. Despite knowing that, we still strive towards that perfectionism because, again, we're so fearful about what other people will think. And we're just so, we're just so fearful. We're triggered by fear, whatever it may be. Also, actually, going back to point number 1 in acknowledging it perhaps, okay, yes, it's easy to say, yes, I'm a perfectionist, but maybe go back into history and see what triggered that. And so for me, like going into my story helps understand why and how I've developed this trait, because it didn't just happen randomly, it happened from my upbringing. What I was taught to believe was right and wrong, so it came from all the way back. Jayon just asked, what would be your perfect career goal? Okay. Is that just a piss up on interview questions? Just number 4, the 5-second rule. I don't know if you've heard of this before. It's got nothing to do with dropping food and then picking it up within 5 seconds and eating it. Nothing to do with that. It's to do with, okay, so when we are fearful, right, we need to recognize our body physiological response. So usually it's our stomach drops, right? We get this kind of like stomach ache or these butterflies, and then it goes up, tightness in the chest, and then your brain's like, oh my god, freaking out. And then so to actually trick the brain, you know how it just kind of goes up, just trick the brain, you use the 5-second rule. So whenever you have to make a decision or you're in a meeting, just count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So Barry, that's a really interesting point. Da, 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 da. And so then you don't give your brain that chance to overthink and be like, holy shit, don't say anything. People are going to think you're stupid. So use it. I use it. And then there's actually a lot of merit in being the first to speak as well. I don't know if you see that in meetings, but like if you are the first person to speak, and it just takes a lot of guts initially, but then it kind of sets the scene for the rest of the meeting. And so, yeah, give it a try if you can. Also be mindful of the negative self-talk. And then sometimes we have that, in our heads, like you could have just finished a business meeting and be like, oh my God, like, what do they think? Do they think I'm stupid? Or you just finished a date and you're like, oh my God, did he like me or she, whatever. Yeah, just be mindful of what's going on in your head. And if it turns to something shameful, so the early example I gave is I am a mistake, then just dial it down a bit. It's easy to say, for me to say, just stop it. But like in reality, it doesn't work because we are self-critical, right? At times. I know I am. So again, just dial it down a little bit. Just pretend there's a bit of elevator music in your head. Number 6 is stop the ladder life. I don't know if you've heard of the ladder life, but it's nothing to do with snakes and ladders, believe me. So when we are born, or from our upbringing, we're taught this script. You get born, you finish school, you go to university, you find the love of your life, you get married, you have kids, blah, 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 and then you die. It's like linear, Oh, and you buy a house and everything in between. I say challenge that, because I don't know where you are in your stage of life, but for me right now, I supposedly, from the outside, I have a family. I've got a child, a 4-year-old, 2 dogs, 5-bedroom house in the burbs, really nice house, but I'm not happy. I did the ladder life and I'm not happy. And what makes me happy is getting rid of things, so I've started to, minimalism is becoming a big thing at the moment. I don't know if it's a millennial thing, but it actually is a big relief. When you start to shed a lot of things and baggage, you actually feel a lot better. So rethink, your life stage, and, stop pleasing others. Please yourself, check yourself before you wreck yourself. That's a mental health check, because perfectionism does, destroy our lives. Prioritizing physical and mental health is the most perfect thing you can do right now. And I think that's all I wanted to say and share, really. And I hope you found that helpful. And we've got a bit of time, so if you've got any questions, please let me know.
So everyone, if you have a question, please write in the chat box below and I can unmute you. But maybe just to start off, Cathy,
Yes.
just in regards to your corporate career and leaving that behind, can you give us more detail around it, about why you left?
Sure.
And what?
Yeah, I didn't really actually go much into my background, so that's a really good question. Thank you. I studied HR because I didn't want to do finance or accounting. I just wanted to do all the kind of leadership kind of subjects. Actually, because I was fearful of doing the finance subjects and economics, because I was worried that I might fail it. So there you go. But yeah, in terms of my career, but it actually worked out better, because I spent more than 10 years in corporate HR. So I worked for companies like Westpac, IAG, construction companies as well, retail. doing HR and advising leaders on people strategy, people transformation. And then I changed my career slightly. So I went more into communication, so employee engagement. So how do we get employees on board through words, basically? Again, I changed careers slightly and became a writer, specializing in HR and workplace relations. And I've always loved writing. That's the thing. But then I never really believed that I never really believed that I was good at it, because I was taught from a very young age that Asians shouldn't be writers or good at English. And so actually, I forgot to share this story earlier. I remember begging my teacher to put me in the standard English class instead of the advanced, because I was like, oh my God, I don't belong. Everyone's so much smarter than me. But yeah, I ended up doing really, really well, which is surprisingly. So then, yeah, I kind of digressed. But yeah, so that was my my corporate career, and I still have a part-time role as a business writer. And then other than that, I also manage my business, which is Keynote Worthy. So Keynote Worthy is a challenger speaker agency focusing on diverse keynote speakers and thinkers. So I started that because I felt that everywhere you looked at conferences and events, it was all the same. Everyone just agreeing with each other, and I just thought that wasn't productive. Thought it was a waste of time for people and everyone. So yeah, I've decided to do something about it. So yeah, Jeff asked, when and how did you realize you were a talented writer, actress, stand-up comic? Good question. I've always been a prankster as a kid, and my parents didn't know that, of course, because they thought I was Hello Kitty. Some of the shit I would do is that so for example, on the side of the street, I would hold up a hairdryer, right? I would pretend, and I would wear cop clothes. I would pretend that it was the speed monitor, right? And then I would just, I was a prankster. I would call people up and pretend to be like, what Bart Simpson does and all that kind of stuff. So being funny, entertaining people, being a performer was always in me, and which is why I did drama in school, because I think innately I wanted to be someone different other than myself. So again, it was like a mask almost. And then so with my stand-up comedy now, the content is very, very different. It's not prankster kind of style. I actually share a lot of stuff about my personal life and what I learned from it. So I do share about my HR career and some of the things that I've seen, some of the employees were actually celebrities as well, and some of the funny stories. Anyway, so that's how I got into it. I gave it a go. I actually, no one told me to. I just walked across a pub one day. I was walking, and there was a poster for stand-up comedy nights, open mic nights. I thought, hey, I'll give that a go, and just ignorantly signed up myself. So yeah, that's how I started. Okay, Luke asked, in terms of feeling safe, how do we identify our threats? And if these threats are from our past, how do we know that they are no longer threats? I think that's a little bit hard for me to answer, because I think it's easier for me to answer if there was a specific example, but I understand it's hard to do this in this context. So how do we identify those threats or those trigger points? For me, it was seeing a psychologist. Listening to a lot of thought leaders with podcasts, listening to a lot of TED Talks, listening to people, and then self-reflecting on myself and just identifying patterns in my behavior and then patterns in other people's behavior as a consequence of my behavior. So a lot of it is partly self-awareness, seeking help from other people as well, because it's not a weakness. Asking help is actually a strength. And how do we know if it's no longer a threat? Well, if it's no longer a threat, if we actually feel comfortable with acknowledging its presence and then kind of saying, okay, I acknowledge it, and then that's shaped my past, but then now I'm moving forward. So that's, yeah, I hope that kind of answers that a little bit. But
Cathy, I might just jump in.
Sure.
I might unmute Luke just to double check. Yeah. I looked. Do you want to ask that question just to make sure that it's the right question you're asking, the right answer? Sorry.
Yep, that's perfect. Yeah, good.
Oh, awesome! Thank you. Thanks, Luke.
I think it's that it's the acknowledgement part which potentially I was missing. So because I've done a lot of the other work, but you know, acknowledging potentially past threats and just, I guess, owning them or being with them in the same room. They're like old ghosts, I guess. So yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah. And just, yeah, like if I was to think about the examples that I gave, like why I am so obsessed with trying to please other people is because I never pleased my parents or my dad, because everything just never seemed good enough. And so then that cascaded into my relationships as well. And then kind of dating people that were kind of similar to my dad, you know, like this kind of authoritarian Vietnam War veteran. And then just trying to read like, do you love me? Kind of like that. Yeah, I'm being a bit extreme, but you know what I mean. Jo Young asks, who were my
I might just unmute him now. Sorry, just cutting in.
Okay.
There we go. Jo Young, do you want to ask that question directly?
Which one?
Yeah, sure.
Hey, man.
Hi, how you going?
Good.
Hey, quick. I'm keen to learn about who were your early sort of role models growing up. Like, who inspired you to do the things that you're currently doing? And did you have any sort of earlier role models when you were growing up?
Earlier role models. I never really thought about that. Like, I have role models now, but then I think earlier on, who I looked up to was actually my sister, because she's 15 years older than me. But she was a role model because she did a lot of caring for me, because my parents were both working. But that's not to say that she was the right role model. She was just kind of role model by default. But what I did do a lot when I was growing up was watch Koshi's Business Builders. I can't remember what it was called back then. And I also read a lot of entrepreneur books as well. There's this lady by the name of Poppy King. I don't know if you guys know her, but she basically invented this lipstick, and she back in the 90s or something like that, and she became really popular. Then her business went bust, and then it just goes through her story, her business story. But who was my role model? The thing with me is that I don't like to go and follow traditional role models. That's my personality. I just, like, you know how everyone just follows Richard Branson and all that, and no disrespect to him or Tony Robbins or whatever, but like with my personality, I'm like, no, I'm going to do something different. That's just me.
Who are they now? Like your current role models?
Who are they now? Okay. Well, I really look up to Brene Brown. Brene Brown, and I'm kind of hesitant to answer that because I acknowledge that the thought leaders that I have shared in this presentation are white as well. But I just love her, and I've got her book here. Dare to Lead. So it's a great book because she just talks about dealing with vulnerability, giving feedback, understanding what your values are. I think that's really important as well. Understanding, what drives you in your everyday life. Yeah, she's my role model. Yes, I would say that she's my number one role model at the moment.
Thanks, Kat.
Thank you.
All right, I'll just unmute Ingrid for her question. Ingrid Mao.
Hi, Catherine. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us. And I just wanted to ask, how do we actually break out of the ladder life mentality? And also, how do we balance sort of our strengths, passions, and dreams with what is seen as practical for society? For example, it's hard to imagine, for many people, hard to imagine how being a good opera singer would be would be a contribution for society. So how do you pursue what you love, whilst also seeing it as contributing to the greater good?
Yeah. So are you an opera singer?
My mom, she's my role model. She's sort of broken out of the ladder life, but I feel like I'm back in the mentality, although she's telling me not to do it. So it's like the opposite situation.
Oh, yeah. It's really hard because, society is telling us to aspire to this ladder life. Like, I remember I was always asked, do you have a boyfriend yet? When are you going to get married? When are you going to have kids? So then it's, and then once you have a kid, it's like, when are you going to have another kid? It just never ends. So that's the ladder life. And then you get questions from people all the time. I think how to break out of it is really questioning what your values are. So what is it that you really value in life? Is it self-achievement? So this, again, going back to Brene Brown, she goes through a lot about our values and identifying them. So think about that. And also have a think about what is it that you want in life? Is it, and then what's the worst case scenario? And then, so I know that some of us don't pursue a career in a particular field because we're worried we might not make enough money or something like that in that field. And then think, okay, suppose that does happen. What's the worst case scenario? Are you going to be homeless? Well, probably not. Do you have a support network? Would it be that you just move back home for a few months and then just kind of like slog it out for a little bit, but then be really happy in this particular career? So if I was to relate it to my particular example, like I'm going to move out of this house, right? I'm going to move out of this 5-bedroom house and I'm going to live in a shitty 1-bedroom apartment. And you know what? I'm really happy. I'm happy with that because I'm comfortable. I don't care that people think that some people are going to, my family are going to think that I'm a failure. And I'm okay with that. And be like, no, I'm going to puff my chest out and say, I'm happy. I'm doing what I love. And that's all that matters. And you should, if you love me as your daughter or whatever it is, you should be happy too. And so I think that's just kind of owning that. So once you own it, other people will respect you. And so I remember when I told my mum, I don't want to go to church anymore because I don't believe in Catholicism. And I said it just like that. No, and then just with conviction. And you know what she said to me? Okay. And that whole time since I moved out of home, I was like, oh my gosh, she's going to ask me if I went to church. And then I felt this fear in my stomach. It was all rising up. And one time I was just like, Mum, I simply don't want to go. That's it. So yeah, I mean, it's hard to kind of reach to that point, but you gotta, this is going to sound really cheesy, Ingrid, but you gotta think, what makes you happy and what are you willing to sacrifice, right? Because there's going to be something that you sacrifice. So yeah, that's my answer. Long-winded answer. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you.
Thanks.
Cool, Cathy. I'm just conscious of time. I think we've got 2 more questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
All right, cool. I think next one I'll unmute. I think it's Z or Z. I'm not sure. I'll just unmute him now. Wait, he's unmuted. Do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Catherine. Thank
Hello.
you. Just noticing that with your side pursuits, there's definitely a creative side in you. And then just wanting to ask, when did you realize you had this creative side of you, despite, being, especially coming from my background, that you're brought up to think about being practical, pursue something that requires analysis and factors, that's what pay the bills. So being in that sort of environment, when did you realize you had that creative spirit, and then how did you nurture it despite that sort of environment?
Thank you for your question. I've always realized since I was a little kid that I was creative, thanks to my, playing pranks on people. I just really wanted to entertain. And so I think entertaining is a form of creativity. But whilst I was entertaining, I was inadvertently trying to be a different person. And then so I've learned from a very young age to be a chameleon, because growing up with a lot of trauma in my life with that domestic violence and my upbringing and silencing my voice, I learned to adapt to it and to silence some emotion as well. And so then, yeah, I think just over time, I developed this resilience, this muscle, and then I can adapt myself to various situations, which became really helpful in my HR career as well, because I was able to fire people. I mean, of course, I'm not proud of that, but I can keep a really straight face and be very diplomatic about things. And then I can switch right away after that meeting and just be like, hey guys, just be that funny Cathy. But how did I nurture it? I think, just if you are okay with doing 2 things, so you can, it's okay to have that job that pays the bills, right? So it could be like an accounting job or whatever it is. And then also balance that with a creative thing. So you could take up painting or guitar or whatever it is. I think it's good to have that kind of balance, provided that you don't become too obsessed, to the point where it kind of is detrimental to the relationships around you. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yep, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, lucky last, Thurinder, if you want to unmute yourself.
Hey, Cathy. I just wanted to ask if there is a better way, or what's the best way of dealing with people who are perfectionists? Are there, do they have high expectations than usual people, and what's your take on that?
People who are perfectionists like control and they have trust issues. They are fearful of letting go because they feel that no one else can do a better job than them, or that they just want to be CC'd in every single bloody email there is. And so if you work with someone like that, then yes, identify that, yeah, they've got some perfectionist kind of traits, and then maybe adapt your style to not necessarily suit their needs, but for example, because they have trust issues, you want to show and demonstrate that you can be trusted by keeping them up to date on things, by saying, hey, I know that research paper is due at the end of the week, just letting you know that I've contacted Jess from accounts and Mary from wherever, and I'm onto it, and we are okay for Friday. You know, just things like that, just to keep them updated. I think perfectionists like that, and I think over time they'll realize, oh, hey, I can let go, I can delegate more. So that's my advice. Thank you.
Cool. All right, I think that wraps up tonight's session. So, as mentioned, feel free to reach out and connect with Cathy if you haven't already. I put a link to the Keynote-worthy website. And I think, Cathy, what's the best way for people to reach you if they're wanting to find out a bit more about you?
Yeah, so the best way to contact me is on LinkedIn. So it's just Catherine Ngo on LinkedIn. Yeah, just contact me there. Visit my website, keynoteworthy.com.au. Yeah, that's it. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining.
Awesome. Cool. And yeah, I'd really like to special thanks to Cathy for this really engaging session. Thank you to all of you for being here as well. And also a big thank you to the PDF team for helping out in the background and making this all possible. So just before we finish up, lastly, we have a few upcoming webinars that I'd like to highlight. So next Thursday, we will host Kaylee Chu, the author of 100 Lunches with Strangers, who will speak about overcoming shyness and stepping out of your comfort zone. And the week after, on the 2nd of July, we'll also host Dr. Duff Watkins, an international executive search consultant, on what it takes to reach the top and be a CEO. I'll just pop them in the link. I'll just pop the links in right now in the chat box for anyone interested in those events. Additionally, we have plenty of events and podcasts in store for you guys, so please keep an eye out on our social media pages, especially LinkedIn, Facebook, and also register for our newsletter as well. Thank you again for all being here tonight. Have a good night, and we'll see you soon. Thanks, guys.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.